Hey, Andy.
Hey, Jed. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. How's your summer treating you?
It's been good so far. It's almost over, which is a bummer. It's such a great time of year, but it's been good. How about you? And I want to hear how our special guest's summer was as well.
Yeah, we got Shaka here. We'll introduce you right at the beginning. Shaka, welcome. We also have some business to do in terms of reminding people what this podcast is. But Shaka, welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks, Jed. Andy, good to see you both.
Yeah. How's your summer been?
Yeah, summer's been good, but I will tell you, summer in Tennessee is very hot. It is very humid. Those of you on the West Coast or the Northeast, appreciate what you have because it's been rough. But school has started already in the Southeast, so my kids are already in school.
Yeah, it starts early down there. Everybody's heading back. It's in Virginia. A lot of them are back. The big counties were coming in this week, and so it does have that feel like summer is fleeting. But it's been hot. It's been a real hot summer.
Yeah. Hey, Andy, aren't you enjoying your first couple months of not being a state board member?
Yeah. I mean, I was with you when we toasted my return to civilian life and my freedom. Yeah.
So how is it on the other side?
It's good. I mean, look, the service part of it's great, but honestly, when sort of stuff comes up and you're like, well, I don't have to quite worry about that in the same way. There's something liberating about that, for sure.
Well, it was great service there, and I did go back after you had brought to my attention the fact that you guys approved those new accountability standards and all that stuff. I actually poked around and looked at them. So, seems like Virginia actually got some good work done while you were there.
We did that. I think we made a real change, some important changes in our, the quality of our history and social studies standards. That's great. The accountability system, we opened these lab schools, which we don't have a charter law really to speak of in Virginia. I mean, technically there's one, but it's a fake one. But we open these lab schools. They're sort of partnerships with school districts and, institutions of higher education, colleges, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges. And they're really interesting around the state. They're focusing on things like shipbuilding or, Amazon web certifications or health professions. And they're, increasing options for kids. And I'm hoping we can keep those and don't fall prey to sort of the political back and forth because it's not a full on school choice plan, but it's certainly a powerful step in the right direction, something that a lot of families like. So we built some cool stuff. We'll see. Politics, as you guys may have heard, politics is pretty tough right now.
Pretty brutal. Well, this is the Wonky Folk Podcast. I'm Jed Wallace, and my partner in crime here is Andy Rotherham. We've been doing this for quite a while. Our last one, Andy, with Stephen Wilson, I got a lot more emails on that than I've gotten on a lot of them. I think it's a nice sweet spot for us when you got somebody that is both kind of with us and pushing us on our thinking at the same time is great. And I think that Shaka is just another one of these examples. AFC, everything going on, American Federation for Children, all that's going on with school choice. There are all sorts of ways that we're like totally on the same team here. There are other times when, wait a second, do we see things exactly the same? So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, I am too. And one thing, we should mention, obviously, you can get the podcast wherever you get podcasts. If you like or subscribe, that helps us and we appreciate it. You can also suggest guests. And so we get lots of great feedback. And one of the pieces of feedback is suggest the kind of people either by type or by specific person who you think would be good here. So we can continue to, have some guests on from time to time, because that's always fun for us. Jed and I do get a little sick of each other after a while. So, variety is the spice of life.
That's an understatement. But I mean, Shaka and I have had some email exchanges, and I think that those exchanges have led to this conversation. In addition to Andy, you and I just saying, wait a second, this tax credit in the one big beautiful bill actually has the likelihood of being a very seismic, a very big change in public education. So Shaka, thanks for being here. American Federation for Children obviously played a big role in getting this whole thing done. Before we get into the details of what this tax credit program looks like, would you mind walking our listeners through your own background, and in particular, if you wouldn't mind, from my perspective, highlighting the fact that you've really got bona fides in the charter school world as well, that informs so much of what you're doing in your current role.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jed. And I feel like I should tell you guys, like, oh, long time listener, first time caller. So thanks for having me on, and glad to have this conversation with you both. So as you mentioned, I'm a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children, and probably your listeners know what AFC is about. But just really quickly, we like to say that we are kind of the nation's voice for school choice. We push particularly hard in state houses. In this case, we'll also be talking about U.S. Congress, but we push really hard for choice bills. We just believe that every child deserves meaningful access to an education that best meets their needs. And if that's public, great, glad that's working. But we know it's not working for a lot of kids. And so if it's a public charter, if it's a micro schools and private choice programs, we're pushing for those things. We do a lot on the educational front as well. So yeah, happy to be with you guys. In terms of how I kind of got into the work, when I came out of grad school, I went up to DC as one who thinks they're interested in policy does. I went to DC and I was working at a place called the Center for Education Reform, which you both know, and I spent a few years there. And then I was at the Institute for Justice, and it's a constitutional law firm. We sued the government, which I do have to say is pretty awesome work. But when we weren't suing the government, we were representing families who wanted to participate in choice programs, right? Because in Florida, you get a law passed, and this is 2000, kind of the early 2000s. So you get a law passed and immediately it's challenged in court. And so we would intervene on behalf of families. And that just, I think really kind of stoked the fire in me to really represent families and speak for families who otherwise didn't have an advocate, didn't have a champion, right? And that, I would say that's especially lower income families, those who have been historically sort of disenfranchised. And so, I kind of wanted to be at that tip of the spear in pushing for education reform. That time was a great time to be in DC because it was right when sort of the teeth for No Child Left Behind were coming into force, into full effect. And so, as y'all know, all of a sudden we had this law passed in 2001. By about 2004 or 5, people are going, all right, we've identified these low performing schools. Now what do we do with it? And so we were talking about this, you had a whole range of reforms. And so I really came to that work in a way that I think wasn't as specific as it was directional, if that makes sense, right? I was like, let's push for reform, but we need to push on this thing from a lot of different angles. And so it's going to be private choice, great. It's going to be teacher performance pay, cool. It's going to be district charter partnerships, okay, whatever. And then when my wife and I moved to Tennessee, again, I wanted to continue that work. And then I started to really put in time with a few charter management organizations, one local and then one national. And that was great. I mean, I hadn't been back in a middle school since I was in middle school. And so then I was working at a school. We had one school, eventually grew to 4. Those included the first conversion schools in the state, the first achievement school district school in the state. This was with Lead Public Schools. And that was just really good work. So I saw school opening, school kind of, school building level management. And from time to time got in classrooms and subbed even. And then I was with Rocket Ship, and we helped Rocket Ship open 3 schools in Nashville. And so again, it's really good work. Jed, I think it's why you and I get along, because, I think we both believe that, there's not one right way to do this. There's going to be lots of different ways. And if folks are doing good things for kids, then, I'm all about it.
Before we jump in further, just you mentioned like you hadn't been to middle school since you were in middle school. Just quickly, what was your own education like? Like where'd you grow up and how was school for you? Did you enjoy it, not enjoy it? Like what was that like?
Yeah, I did enjoy school. I blame this on my mother, who's not even 5 feet tall. And I just tell folks like I had to enjoy school because I was obviously not going to the league. I was not going to play ball or whatever. But in seriousness, I grew up on Long Island in New York. The schools that we were zoned to were academically low performing, unsafe, chronically unsafe schools. And so, so my parents, who worked for the Postal Service, saved with some help, sent my siblings and I to Catholic school. And so we did that. And then eventually, and so I always say, like, that's one form of school choice, paying for it. The other form of school choice we also took advantage of. We moved from New York all the way to Georgia. And then I went to public high school in Georgia. Also really enjoyed that. So again, I think it does inform me in that I go, there's not one right way. Different models work for different kids. And so let's see if we can unlock that for 55 million kids in the country.
Well, in terms of unlocking things, this tax credit embedded within the one big beautiful bill, I think is just starting to register across the reform world about just how profound this difference can be. I'd like you to talk, if you wouldn't mind, on in two ways about the bill. First of all, can you just educate our world? What does it say? What's the thumbnail that we're being given on this? And then if you could do a second pass, which is the mainstream focus is wrong or is underweighting a few things that we should be paying more attention to. Because it was, for me, learning in a few conversations, one of them with you, but several other people, about some of those underappreciated things that really made me begin to understand this is a bigger change than I was first thinking.
Yeah. So this federal tax credit program that passed, as you mentioned, as part of the one big beautiful bill, it's funny. It does represent a really big deal, but in some ways, it's not the big deal that you often hear about, right? Because everybody says, or often in the media, I've seen these headlines, and they're like, new federal voucher passes. And I'm like, well, not exactly. So let's talk about what it is. All right. So it's a federal tax credit program that in some ways mirrors state level tax credit programs that we've had for years, right? This has existed in a number of states: Arizona, Florida, Indiana. For a while, you had Pennsylvania, Illinois, et cetera. Lots of these around the country, but those have been regarding state level taxes. So this is the first time in history that a taxpayer, the three of us are taxpayers, that a taxpayer can get a dollar for dollar tax credit off of federal taxes, federal tax liability. If you, instead now of sending money, your tax liability to the Department of Treasury, you direct it to a scholarship granting organization. Now you will get that dollar for dollar credit, right? So that's the taxpayer side. And then the scholarship granting organization, the SGO, can then give out scholarships. And so it can give scholarships, and those can be mission driven, right? So you might have an SGO that says, in my area, we're going to give scholarships to students in Middle Tennessee. And so maybe that's going to be some of the criteria, but the scholarships, the dollars themselves, can be used to cover a range of educational expenses. So the use is much more like an education savings account, right? The administration of it is more like a tax credit scholarship, a tuition, scholarship. That's really the gist of it. In terms of how much of a credit you can get, right now it's $1,700 per taxpayer. So that's how much you can put into it. The scholarship granting organizations will make their own decisions about the size of the scholarships. And then in terms of who's eligible from a family standpoint, it is for most students are eligible, but there is an income limitation. And that income limitation, I believe, is 300% of the median area income. So now we're getting really wonky. But there is a slight income limitation on which families can use it. So that's the gist of it.
And what can you use it for?
Yeah, great question. In terms of what you can use it for, you can use it for the same thing. Some people may be familiar with the Coverdell scholarship, right, or Coverdell expenses. And so you can use it for any of those qualified educational expenses. So this would be things like tuition and fees at a school, books, tutoring, other educational supplies. If there's a student with special needs, you could use it for special needs services. You could use it for room, board. It's really educational expenses. Some materials and technology might be included in that. So it's pretty broad in terms of how you could use it. So not just tuition is the key.
So can you walk me through some of the details about how a tax credit program like this gets implemented? Because I'm not from a state where there is a state program like this. So as I understand it, this could be described to me incorrectly. But first of all, it's not going to really start until the 2027 tax year.
Yeah, 2027. Yep.
And so the funding will really start flowing thereafter, presumably 28 school year. But you as a tax
27, 28 school, I would expect it to start 27. Yeah.
Okay. So then you as a taxpayer, you have to decide, okay, yes, I want to take advantage of this tax credit. And then you have to identify the specific SGO you want the funding directed to.
Correct.
So if I'm going to TurboTax, and I want this thing to happen, now presumably people are going to be reaching out to TurboTax and saying, okay, there's this new funding, there's this new tax credit program. Hey, TurboTax, make a drop-down window. Let me get to my state. Let me get to my, but somehow
100%.
You've got to direct it down to the specific SGO level, right?
Correct.
And then the SGO will have different things that it could be supporting. But let's say we want to subsidize private schooling. Well, private school would be able to say, hey, here's the percentage of students, and maybe the names of the students. I don't know if that's required, that actually fall below that 300%, income level. All of those students potentially could be recipients of a $1,700 benefit if enough money flows into an SGO that's got the mission to fund those kinds of schools. Is that a good summary? Or what am I missing here?
Yeah, almost. Okay, so most of that is right. But let me sort of clean up just a little bit. So that first, the $1,700, that dollar amount, that's what taxpayers put in. So if the three of us put in $1,700, now your listeners are going to see how bad my math on the fly is. I should not have done that. But what's that work out to? $5,100? There's three of us. Yeah. So we each put in $1,700. Well, let's just say that we want it to go to a scholarship granting organization in Nebraska, which none of us are from, but we picked the exact middle of the United States. And so we said Nebraska. We direct it to Nebraska. The Nebraska SGO might give scholarships worth $5,000. So SGOs, so that scholarship amount, that dollar amount that families receive is not tied to the $1,700 amount. That's on the taxpayer side. Okay. So there's going to be some decisions to make, which also means that different SGOs they're going to make different decisions, right? Some are going to have them be much more limited. It might be kind of last dollar style. Some might be, bigger tuition grants or whatever grants that go out, not just for tuition.
We'll talk about that. What is the whatever? So what if you wanted to have an SGO that you wanted to do tutoring, or you wanted to do something that services homeschool students, or what are the limits that what can and can't SGOs orient themselves towards? Yeah,
this is going to be a good question. So the rules have not been promulgated yet, so that's got to give that pretty sizable disclaimer. Right?
A lot of rules to be made. Yeah,
a lot of rules to be made. Well, and frankly, it's complicated because it's happening at the federal level, right? So we saw how complicated it was to get this thing passed. There will be lots of voices that want to be heard during the rulemaking process. So a little bit, Andy, TBD on how specific an SGO can get. Now, per the language in the law, there are a few things, and one of them relates back to Jed's example. An SGO can't be affiliated with a single school.
Oh, it can't?
No. So
that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So SGOs have to give out. There are some rules just baked right into the law. So, for instance, they've got to give out 90% of their revenue. So this also means you can't just start up, or you can't just say, well, we're now accepting tax credits for our existing nonprofit. I mean, you maybe could do that, but you're going to have to start sending 90% of your revenue out the door in scholarships. That doesn't work for most nonprofits, right? So it actually is going to benefit SGOs to have some, to get some scale benefit and work across lots of schools or lots of people, maybe even partner, with other organizations. So that's one piece. So SGOs have to, they have to benefit students who attend at least 2 schools and at least 10 students. You also cannot direct. You can't just pick out. I would love for you, if you want to just support the Mitchell girls, I would love that, but you're going to have to just send a check directly to me and you're not going to get a tax write-off for it.
We'll put that address in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah. And I promise I'll claim it as income if the IRS is listening.
So not an individual school, but what about a school district? Yeah, we're going to create an SGO for, I live in Davis public schools. Is that going to be permissible?
That will probably be permissible. But, and I think we're going to get to this, what's probably not going to be permissible is for the decision makers here. And this is a piece we haven't talked about yet, but for governors, who are the ones who actually have to opt into this program, it's probably not going to be permissible that they can get too cute and pick and choose, based on some of those underlying, use cases.
Okay, I want to get to that because the governor dynamics here and the process for approval and what is within governor's purview and what needs to come from the legislature fast. But before we get there, so it just seems to me as any place where we have opted in, and if there is a school district eligibility, there is going to be massive outreach to everybody. Hey, you can all direct $1,700 a kid to our school district. We'll make sure it gets back to your school. It's going to be for such and such a purpose. And just the massive marketing to try to get the taxpayers to choose the right drop-down menu seems to me like ocean that we're sailing into here soon.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how that could be possible, but there is there are a few things at play. For instance, again, these are funds that are going to families. So it's a little bit challenging to imagine a use case for a public school district or for most public school districts. I'm thinking about the one where I live, which is not terribly innovative. I don't know that our district could put something together fast enough, put offerings together fast enough that would require payments such that families would need a third-party scholarship to access those services. If that makes sense. Okay, right? So here would be a different use case. Because tuition is easy. Like people understand that you got to pay for it. Tutoring even is easy. And somebody's got to pay for the tutoring. But what in a public school district is extra that you're required to pay for that you would say, oh, I need a $5,000 scholarship for, right? Now a family could still apply to an SGO, but again, the family is the decision maker. And so that's where I think districts are going to get probably a little squeamish because they can't control it, right? If I'm a family and I've got a kid in the district, well, if I get that scholarship, I have to use it for educational expenses, but I don't have to use it for educational expenses in my district. That makes sense. So that's where it's going to, there's some unknowns here. But I do want to say one point, and that is students are basically eligible for this regardless of the type of school they attend. And so that's really important too. And I think that gets missed a lot because if you read the headline that says, oh, it's a federal voucher program, well, that means one thing, very specific thing in a very specific private school context. The fact that you could have a student with exceptional needs attending a charter school and they could apply for a scholarship and they could use some of those funds for some supplemental services, some additional tutoring, et cetera. That's pretty new. And I think a lot of people miss that.
Andy, let me shut up here because my cynicism about how traditional public schools take on their economics is going to be insufferable. Go ahead, ask a few additional questions that maybe from a school board perspective from Virginia or wherever might be occurring to you.
Well, the behavioral stuff here is going to be interesting. And states like Virginia will be interesting, which Virginia is a state that's very likely to have a Democratic governor come January. And there's going to be a lot of cross pressure on Democratic governors what to do about this, because you hear people are saying it's free money on the table. And so you should take it, but it's obviously got some of the choice baggage. We should talk about all that. Before we get to that, you mentioned the Coverdale program. And I can remember when that was Senator Paul Coverdale of Georgia. And it was sort of an education savings account for K-12 expenses. It was essentially like an expansion of the 529 idea, but and it was for K-12. It was very controversial and much more modest than this. And I don't know. I mean, you were closer, I suspect, to like all the lobbying around this and everything. But I was struck. This does seem consequential. I mean, Marguerite Rosa, the school finance expert, she estimates this will generate about $28 billion in activity. Like, this is a consequential thing for K-12 schools. And yet, I don't know, it seemed like the fight was just not like, we've had much smaller school choice programs that have just been absolutely scorched earth battles on Capitol Hill. And so like, I wanted to hear your reaction to that. It's just, has the politics changed? Was it just the unique structure of this bill? Was it just the unique moment we're in? With everything going on in that bill, but it just didn't seem like a typical school choice fight.
Well, let me say this. I think it was, that just means that the folks who were engaged were doing their level best to make it, look like a duck, right? And so smooth on top, but paddle, 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 kick, kick, kick underneath the surface. It was really churning underneath. And so this thing in the final week was all over the place in terms of the content, in terms of whether it was even in. I mean, this is
some of that was the parliamentarian, right, with the Senate, whether it would comport with the rules.
Correct. Yeah. So there were definitely, as you said earlier, turns out politics is tough. Politics is really messy, right? And this got very political. So hats off to all the advocates who jumped in and supported, and Invest in Ed was really big on this, AFC, others. But something that I do think was different is that this was discussed among senators and members of the House last year. So it's been like a year of talking about really some specific language, not to mention depend upon who's counting, the 15 or 20 years that people have kind of send up some trial balloons on, hey, what about some kind of federal choice program? But I think my sense is that when you get some specific language out there early, you start to build consensus, you start to workshop it, you start to get buy-in. I know there are a lot of advocates, I think, who want to keep everything super close to the vest until the last minute. But I believe that the risk in doing that is that then you don't know where your flaws are, and you don't know what's going to derail you. And so we put something out there. We know some people are going to hate it. All right, cool, fine. But what about the ones who are close? How do we get them to yes? And I think we had enough time to kind of get folks to yes, and got it across the line. And by the way, we're still going to see how things shake out with both rules, though I'm encouraged about that process. And then in future years, because, as you mentioned, Coverdale kind of went through its sort of debate process, but you don't really hear anything about it anymore, right? Nobody talks about it. So like, we pass these things and it's like, okay, well, now it's just part of the code. It is what it is. So I'll be curious to see how this changes, expands, et cetera, over time.
Well, and one real technical question: who issues the regulations for this? I don't know the answer to that. Is it going to be Treasury, or is it going to be Education?
Treasury. Yeah.
Treasury. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I love that the storytelling about, hey, we need to have enough engagement with a bunch of policymakers and have broad support. And as far as the OBB goes, there were two groups that were important. Either people that were willing to stop the whole darn bill over their pet project, and it doesn't sound to me like there was anybody that was in that camp, nor do I know anybody that was saying, I won't vote for it unless it's in there. So without it being there, then it defaults back to the president wanted it. Trump wanted it.
Yeah, he did.
and he said he wanted it. That's what happened. Now, then there get to be the parliamentary details. Is this going to be 17? Hey, can we allow a $2 million, a tax deduction for our high taxpayers? And those details, rippled out thereafter.
Well, he's not talking about it, though. I mean, you're saying he wants it, but like, I don't know. Shaka, have I been missing? I just haven't heard him talk about this.
No, not much. I mean, I would
in niche conservative media or something, but it's just not like in any of the broader communications he's doing. I haven't heard any discussion of this. Have you?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think respectfully, I think the president's been a little busy with other things in the past month, right? But no, I'll tell you, Senator Cruz was big. So Jed, you talk about like
that.
Who was sort of willing to kind of lay across the tracks. Cruz was and did for this. On the House side, which was less contentious. Byron Donalds was really big on this. But Senator Cruz and then the Speaker, the Senate President, super important on this.
Well, as I understand it, where Cruz was really focused was make sure the president, at some point in the process, makes it clear to his staff that this is something that he values, and that in fact did happen. And so it kind of, but whatever. These are the political dynamics. I don't think that really makes any difference in terms of the substance of the thing. This is just how the darn thing got done. I think one question I'm fascinated by, I had not seen that Marguerite has estimated $28 billion. And so Mike,
28, something like that. Don't hold me to it. We'll throw in the show notes. I'll find the thing that she put out.
So I was wondering, Shaka, has AFC done any estimates or is this just so unprecedented? Who the heck knows? It would seem to me as though it's going to be significantly higher than 28 billion, but I don't know.
Yeah, this is one of those where it's just really hard to get a good line on this. I mean, I think the number will be quite large. It certainly has the potential to be quite large, right? Because any taxpayer, anybody with federal tax liability in the country can participate. So that turns out there's a lot of us. But you need a few things. You got to have scholarship granting organizations, right?
Yep.
There's got to be some kind of education / marketing campaign that's happening so that people know about this. And as you mentioned, I would love for TurboTax, the next time I log on, for there to be a drop down and I select the ones in my state, right? Or whatever. Select the ones in a different state. Because that's something that you can do. And I think I'll come back to. But it's really hard to say. I mean, when there was a number in the legislation, in the draft legislation, I guess it wasn't even draft at this point. The number oscillated between 20 billion, 10 billion, a cap of 20 billion, 10 billion, 4 billion. It was all over the place. And then next thing you know, we got this no cap, but a $1,700 per taxpayer cap. And so if there's a tricky part, that's going to be the tricky part, because to get to 26, 27, or 28 billion, like, Marguerite suggests, that's a lot of $1,700 contributions, right? None of us knows that development person.
Like 15,000, but don't hold me to that. It's taxpayers maxing out.
Oh no, I think it's more than that.
Like I'm doing the math in my head.
Yeah, to get to the billion number, I think I believe
you're right. That would be million. Yeah, so it'd be 100. It would be 160. Sorry, no one came here to try to watch us do mental math.
but again, like so that's going to get tricky, right? To raise that kind of money in what you might call, in some ways, like small dollar donations. It'd be much easier if you could go to high net worth individuals and say, hey, can you direct 10% of your tax liability over there? 10% of, for high net worth is a whole lot of folks. So
you've done this for a while, and I mean, there have been like opportunities for like corporate tax, with personal tax in states to fund these things. Are there any sort of lessons you've learned from that, or things to watch for?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we have seen many of these programs at the state level. I think the marketing after the fact is always really important. You want to, and I talked to other just colleagues in the space about this. Sometimes, maybe apropos of wonky folk, the name of this podcast, but sometimes we want to talk to people and we want to tell them like, oh, let me tell you all of the market-driven competitive effects of this program. Okay, that is not what normal people want to talk about, right? They want to go, oh, I can get $5,000 and I can use it to improve education for this child this year. Okay, now we're talking about something tangible. So I always think translating it to the person, kind of the end user, in this case, families, is really important. Also with this, and I think we should speak about this. We don't want states to try to get, again, too cute and think that they need to do a whole lot. They actually don't need to do a lot about this program. This is a federal tax credit program. Governors must opt in. It says actually governors or what other entity in a state makes such elections regarding federal tax benefits. So the governors, most of the time, that's going to be governors. We're going to see North Carolina is doing some interesting things where the legislature has basically said, hey, we want to opt in. So governors need to opt in. They don't actually need to do a whole lot. The statute lays out how the money can be used, who's eligible, what an SGO needs to do to qualify. So governors don't really need to do a whole lot. So this then is the question, what's kind of going to become, I think, maybe a wedge issue, Jed, for blue state governors, right? Is what are they going to do? And
let's talk about that.
Question.
That's what we wanted to hear. How do you see that playing out? Because it does, and you're already starting to see some. North Carolina made a move just this week when we're filming this to give the governor. So the governor's going to have some flexibility there on what he does. Like, how do you see that playing out in different blue states? That wedge.
Yeah. So North Carolina is interesting. You have a Republican majority in the General Assembly. They have passed a law saying that they're going to participate, that they want to participate. And then you have the governor saying, as a Democrat, saying, well, I want to participate, but he's sort of trying to have one foot in, one foot out a little bit. I want to participate, but what if we only direct it towards SGOs that are directed towards conventional public school district funding?
Enrichment exercises happening in traditional public schools.
Correct. And I think that's not going to be allowed, actually. I don't think governors are going to be able to pick and choose. I think it's going to be a sort of all or nothing. Like if SGOs come and they meet the qualifications, which are, again, laid out in statute, I think a governor is going to have to go like, all right, basically here's the slate. And some of those might be Catholic schools SGOs, right? Or diocesan SGOs. Some might be based on whatever, it's Eastern North Carolina. Some might be, or this is going to be the Charlotte Mecklenburg SGO that pops up. Okay, but if they all hit check the boxes, I think it's going to have to be all or nothing. And if it's nothing, then this is where it gets really interesting because, Jed, in your state, in California, you've got a lot of taxpayers. Well, every taxpayer can contribute to an SGO. The question then for the governor of California is, if you ever elect another one again, I don't know who's running, nobody and everybody. But the question for a governor of California is going to be, well, if we don't participate, where are we potentially exporting all those dollars?
Yeah.
Right. Because again, a taxpayer in LA can get a dollar for dollar, $1,700 credit by contributing that money to an SGO in Tennessee, Georgia, Arizona, whatever. So, that's $1 billion right there. If California says, no, we don't want to participate, but the taxpayers still access TurboTax and they've got the drop down like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about Marguerite at 28, 30 billion, whatever that is. That's getting close to between a third and a fourth of the entire state budget for public education in California. So these are huge numbers.
Big numbers.
But Shaka, I've read several columns about this is going to be in private school tuition assistance or whatever, some additional thing that can be made available for in a private school context. And in the public school context, it's going to be enrichment. What I think you're saying is if a state opts in, then SGOs of all different kinds can get into the landscape. Some of them may be public school enrichment activities, and others may be private school. But you're saying that the governor, from a state law standpoint, is not going to be able to prevent one or the other from being the only option that's available for taxpayers choosing?
I think that's right. I mean, again, the rules have to be promulgated. So, we're going to see. But yeah, I think that's going to be the case. I don't think, and also think about the legal implications here. If a governor said, I've got 2 applications for SGOs in front of me. One is for Oakland, Oakland Public Schools, or supporting Oakland Public School students is how it needs to be. The other one is supporting diocesan schools in Oakland. Well, you're going to have some real problems if both of those check all the boxes and you say no to one. That sounds like a First Amendment problem. The Supreme Court would love that case right now.
Well, especially you've got also politically, you've got blue state with a fair amount of penetration of parochial schools, for instance, where
that's right.
Politically that would be a difficult position.
Am I remembering right that Shapiro said he'll sign as long as the legislature brings him something saying to sign? Is that, am I remembering right?
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't know if he said that about this or about it might have been about this. I know, I think that he signaled that he's open to taking the next step. And, again, that's an interesting kind of purple dynamic in Pennsylvania.
Is there any blue state gov that has said, I'm in, I'm signing? I'm not aware of one, if there is one.
I'm not aware of one, but I am aware of many that have got their policy people kind of behind the scenes asking questions and investigating how do we do this? Because again, it's going to be hard to tell families, hey, we're not participating in this thing. Our state is not going to offer, is not going to make scholarships available to kids within the state. That's just going to be a tough thing to have to say.
You know what it reminds me a lot of is casino gambling, where like the biggest predictor whether or not it spread was whether your neighboring states had it. And so you had the states that were like not necessarily enthusiastic about embracing gambling, but were even less enthusiastic about watching money, basically flow to the next state. And that's going to be a very compelling, the national nature of this will create some dynamics that we haven't seen until now. These choice fights have been state by state, but this nationalizes it in a way because, to your point, taxpayers can participate elsewhere, and so it's going to be hard to explain why you're sending this money from your state elsewhere.
Yeah, and especially when it's not coming out of your state coffers, right? Like this is not. This is different from a state-based choice program where you often hear opponents would say, well, if you're going to have that choice program, why not just not have the choice program and do a bigger appropriation and send all the money into the existing public schools? Well, this is different. It's sort of, you can participate in the program, but there's not a counterfactual where you just get this money.
So, Andy, where do you think the unions come down on this? It just seems to me as though a lot of them, if you're CPS, CTU or UTLA, you're thinking, wait a second. Okay, 400,000 kids in Los Angeles. Okay, this is a ton of freaking money. We're going to be able to convince most of the people in Los Angeles to put it into some place that it will end up benefiting us. And what's the ancillary, negative we got to put up with? Oh, a few private schools in California are going to get some. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them are not going to make this a total line of the sand issue for governors.
Well, I think Shaka's point also is we got to wait to see how the rules come in and how much it forces their hand or not. If it's a thing where if it's a situation where you're going to have different SGOs competing to offer different kinds of models, then they may decide they can play in that market. So I think we have to wait to see the rules. And I think it may just be because there was so much stuff going on in that bill overall and some really consequential stuff. I know, Jed, you're calling it the one beautiful bill because you're very MAGA, but I don't really, I don't really like the bill very much. There was so much stuff going on that they were preoccupied, but I just didn't see the fight out of them that I've seen on some other on some other stuff. Shaka, what I want to hear from you is okay, you got the choice crowd is riding really high on this. It's a huge win, unprecedented. But what keeps you up at night? Like there's always the stuff that people actually worry about that could become a problem. What keeps you up at night?
Yeah, are you thinking specifically about the federal piece or just generally what's
As it gets implemented? Like what's the things that no one is thinking that, or I guess what are the things that civilians are not thinking about that is going to blow up in 2029, but you are keenly attentive to?
Well, I don't know that it's going to
stuff like that on every issue. What do you worry about with implementation that could cause problems or headwinds for this down the road?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know that. I don't have any reason to think that these are going to become catastrophic. However, there are a lot of states that don't have experience with a state-based tuition tax credit program, right? So if you are Arizona, well, there's already a bunch of SGOs that exist. There's some muscle memory there, both in terms of how you get the dollars, how you dole them out, all that stuff. If you are, Tennessee, we don't have a tax credit program. We've got other private choice programs now, but this is a little bit different. We've seen in Missouri has a tax credit funded ESA program. And what we found is that's really tricky. It's tricky to raise those dollars. It turns out that a lot of people who have tax liability already have strategies to direct their tax liability to other organizations, right? So it's not just like everybody just cuts the check directly to the IRS. A lot of people already write checks to other places. Now, this might be worth a little more. So there's some of that SGO infrastructure. That's what I'm thinking a lot about. I also don't love the annual opt-in nature of this. Could be really disruptive in election years. So a governor has to opt in to this program on an annual basis. That's not a big deal in my state, in Tennessee. Andy, in your state, in Virginia, where you've got both term limits and it's such, from governor to governor, or it's Republican, it's Democrat, bounces back and forth. That could cause real disruption if we're not careful. So that's something I'm thinking about too.
Chuck, I don't think we're gonna have enough time to talk about how AFC is kind of unique in the broader private school choice landscape. You and I talked a little bit about that. Maybe we can touch upon it before we go. We're kind of getting low on time here. But
Sure.
One thing in front of that because I think it's just fascinating. What's going on with Universal and how are we keeping our thumbs on the scale for low-income kids? And I think AFC has been distinguishing itself from some of the others. I think this is a really important thing for our world to know. But can you speak to charter schools specifically and this bill and what you think some of the benefits are to the charter school movement if we're proactive enough and play our cards right here?
Yeah, and I would love to come back at some point if if the people want it. And we can talk more about that because I do think we care a lot about low-income families and prioritizing them in choice programs, and we've been able to get that passed and get that baked into some state programs. As regards charter schools, and I mentioned that I've got a good deal of experience in the charter sector. I really think that the federal tax credit program is one of these things that can inject some or spur on, I guess, some innovation back into the charter space. And I say that respectfully. I know that there are charters doing innovative things, but I also know that there are a lot of charters, I would say too many charters, who, said like adding 30 minutes of instructional time, like that's what counts as innovation. And I would just sort of say like, maybe not. I think we can do more. I think we can do better. And this is going to be the kind of program that really innovative school leaders gets their wheels spinning, right? So for instance, I know of I can't say which one, but I know of a CMO in Texas that already has got a reputation for providing really good college counseling services for its students. Well, it could provide those services for other kids in the community, right? Those kids might be in the existing public school district. They might be homeschool students, whatever. I think that's a win for kids, right? And so if families could get those funds, could then go to charters for some of these a la carte services. Maybe it's an AP course, right? That happens in the summertime. Maybe it's, as I mentioned, college counseling. Who knows what? I think there's going to be some cool ways to innovate for the leaders that appreciate that. If they're worried so much about private choice, as some are, okay, cool. You can sit it out, but it's happening regardless.
Is AFC itself going to become an SGO?
Oh, that's a good question. That's above my pay grade. I think, again, I mentioned that you'd have to send 90% of your revenue would have to go out the door in scholarships. And so I suspect that would mean all of us taking a major pay cut to make those numbers work.
It's not 90% of the tax revenues. It's 90% of the aggregate revenues of the organization.
The organization's revenue. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
No. Now that being said, are related entities gonna crop up? Yes, because you're gonna have, as I mentioned, you're gonna have a diocesan SGO that pops up. Does that mean that all of the revenue of the Catholic Church goes to this? No, of course not. Right? It's gonna be a separate 501c3 entity. So these are gonna start, but they do have to be state based, and so that is something that I think we're gonna have to keep an eye on. More will come out in the rules as well, but I don't think it's not going to be a situation where you have one SGO to rule them all. You're going to have a lot of these in the States.
And I think the point you made earlier a moment ago about infrastructure, I think is just really important, that we're having just absolute sea change in direct payments to parents from government that started during the pandemic, post-pandemic. And in some other policy areas, like there's a lot of infrastructure around all the things that go with that, eligibility for benefits and compliance and those pieces. And that's just across a range of government programs. But you just don't see that that much in the K-12 sector. And so this is new. There will obviously be some problems, and those will attract a lot of attention, as is often the case. And it just seems like that's where to your point a moment ago, that's where there's going to be some growing pains while people, and we've seen that with most of these scholarship programs in general. You've seen in choice programs, there's been some growing pains. This sort of stuff's gotten figured out.
Yeah, and I think if I was talking to some of my friends in the charter space, I would say it also means, like, when you have payments or a benefit like this, it goes directly to families. You need to be pretty small c conservative in how you build this into your operations and your budget, right? Because it's not saying, oh, we started this SGO associated with our network of schools in Austin, Texas. And now we know that dollar for dollar, whatever we raise comes right, just as a transfer payment to our network of schools. That's not how it's going to work. It goes to parents, and parents make that decision. And even in states with ESA programs, that's something that we've had to really educate private school leaders on. This is not a private school program. It's a parent choice program. And now a lot of parents are going to choose your school. They're going to choose your services, but you can't direct them. The thing that really breaks the chain, frankly, and is really important, is that parents get to direct their funds.
So the SGO can say, we're going to fund these kinds of things. This is what our priority is. But then we give it to the parents. They are then limited by the funding priorities of the SGO, or once they get it, then they do with it what they will.
That's a good question. I think there's going to be rules about this, right? Because they're certainly limited. What we know is that they're limited by the federal law in terms of use. If anything, an SGO might be able to place some of the application, limitations. Again, say from these zip codes, whatever, this part of the state, what have you. But even then, I think we're going to learn more about in the rules process.
Yeah, I've heard of charter school people talking about funding that's not flowing to our schools uniquely, especially around things like transportation. Okay, let's create an SGO that's going to help parents get to their charter school. But that would seem to be, there would be some pretty specific rules there. And hey, we're going to give it to the parents. Hey, you're given this funding so that you can spend it on transportation. But if they chose to do something different, I guess this is the detail that the rule process needs to get into.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're just going to have to wait and see a little bit, right? I mean, it might be the kind of thing where you say, hey, good news. We started a new transportation offering, but it might take some startup capital before things really get rolling and you see what the demand looks like and that kind of thing. But again, there's an opportunity here for some pretty cool practices, and I think the charters will absolutely benefit from it. I know that there's going to be charter leaders that are doing some innovative things, whether it's these sort of a la carte or unbundled offerings, what have you. And if this kind of adds some energy in that space, I think that's a really good thing.
All right, this is cool. Hey, Andy, what do you think, though? What do you think about having Shaka back and we try and get Robert Enlow here?
Oh, yeah, I think the charter stuff can be
get
great.
Robert here, and let's just mix it up here on this the design of these private school choice programs, and let's suss out the different positions that these organizations have, because I think what I know, AFC is leading on some of the issues. I wish you guys were even more vocal, on the need to prioritize low-income students, and the need not to give up on academic accountability for, these funds and those kinds of things. But I don't know, Eddie, maybe before the end of the calendar year or something, we could get a conversation before we really mix it up.
Yeah, whether you agree or disagree with different schools of thought, I do think people don't fully appreciate often. There is a lot of nuance, and there's sort of different theories of action around universality versus means tested and targeted. And there's people who think different strategies are going to be a better way to make sure it's more inclusive of low income people. And just to sort of, I think, to get a few people on to sort of air that, I think would be interesting for folks, regardless of what you think about any of those questions. There's just, in my experience, there's more nuance to it than sort of the blunt force trauma of like choice versus anti-choice sort of reveals.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, I dare say this is showing my cards a little bit, but there's also gravity, right? There's just political gravity. And so some of that is like, we can have these discussions on X or, whatever, Blue Sky or what have you. But the conversation that's had under the Capitol Dome, that's where the legislation gets passed, right? And so we can talk all we want about what's going to get us to some sort of like Austrian economic utopia fastest. But then we need to go and translate that to legislators from whatever, rural Oklahoma or suburban Tennessee or just wherever. And so that's where the rubber meets the road.
I also just think the appetite for choice has changed a lot in ways that I feel like, so you're right about the decisions and the conversations that happen under the dome are the ones that matter in terms of what gets passed, what the policy looks like. But I just feel like there's a whole separate conversation. A lot of the stuff you hear talked about in the policy world, like that ship has sailed in terms of what parents are saying they want, how their own behavior, and so all the revealed preferences. And I feel like you often find yourself in these conversations that feel 10 years old just because the world has just changed a great deal in the last 5 years.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right. Well, this was great. Shaka, thank you so much for being available for this. Andy, as always, enjoyed having some time with you.
Super fun. This was great. And Shaka, seriously, thank you. I know it's a busy time of year for you, so making the time for us, we appreciate it. Jed, it's always good to see you, and I will see you soon online or in person.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.